Most headlines spotlight Austin's gleaming towers and Dallas's relentless expansion, where cranes dominate the skyline. Picture neighborhoods where vacancies rise faster than anything else. We're counting down the 10 Texas cities with the most abandoned homes in 2026. And some of the numbers are unsettling. From declining oil towns to storm-battered coastal stretches, empty houses sit waiting for owners who won't return. Stay with us for number 1. A city so defined by industrial decline it feels like a refinery surrounded by a ghost town. Let's begin. Number 10 takes us to Wichita Falls. With a name like that, you'd think the place would feel cool and revitalizing. But instead, the atmosphere suggests something that's slowly evaporating. Situated near the Oklahoma state line, this city has spent years trying to stay relevant. And if we're being honest, it hasn't exactly been winning that fight. By 2026, the strain is clearly visible in the local housing market. When you drive through certain neighborhoods, it's not just the usual for sale signs catching your eye. You'll notice homes that look as if they've simply surrendered to time and neglect. The heat presses down heavily here, almost as though it's baking any remaining optimism right out of the weathered wood siding and cracked driveways. That's what makes it difficult to witness, because this isn't a town without effort. It's filled with hardworking residents who found themselves trapped in an economic slowdown that much of the rest of Texas seems to have left behind. The statistics only deepen the concern. Analysts at the United States Census Bureau report that the poverty rate consistently lingers above 18%, an uncomfortable figure by any standard. And when nearly 1 in 5 residents is struggling financially, basic home maintenance can quickly shift from routine responsibility to unaffordable burden. Vacancy trends add another layer to the story. Recent reports from Atom Data Solutions show that so-called zombie properties, houses stuck in foreclosure limbo without being fully repossessed, are increasing here at a pace that outstrips the state average. In many ways, these homes exist in a kind of real estate purgatory, not fully alive on the market, yet not entirely abandoned either. Demographics also play a role. As younger residents relocate to larger metro areas in search of stable, higher-paying jobs, they leave behind aging housing stock that struggles to attract buyers. Data from Zillow indicates that property values in Wichita Falls have had trouble keeping up with inflation. In practical terms, that means someone who purchased a home 2 decades ago might discover that, adjusted for today's cost of living, they've actually lost value rather than gained equity. Picture trying to list a house with a 30-year-old roof and a shifting foundation only to learn its market price is lower than that of a brand-new pickup truck. Public safety concerns don't exactly sweeten the deal. According to crime statistics compiled by the Federal Bureau of Investigation, property crime rates in the area remain stubbornly above the national average, a factor that tends to make outside investors think twice. And so the pattern continues. Residents move away because conditions decline, and conditions decline even faster because residents move away. Number 9 brings us to Paris. Yes, the name might spark images of sidewalk cafes and flaky croissants. But let's reset expectations. This is East Texas, not France. There is, in fact, a replica of the Eiffel Tower topped with a bright red cowboy hat. But once you've snapped that photo, the charm gives way to something far more complicated. Paris, Texas, feels like a textbook example of small-town America watching opportunity drift toward bigger cities flush with tech cash and corporate relocations. Cruising through the older neighborhoods doesn't feel like sightseeing. It feels more like surveying long-term structural fatigue. The humidity here is constant and unforgiving, and abandoned timber doesn't stand a chance against it. You'll pass once stately Victorian homes that likely served as crown jewels of their blocks decades ago. Now they slump and lean, their porches sagging, their windows boarded as if bracing for a storm that blew through years back and never truly left. The financial picture is just as weathered as the paint. Data from the Bureau of Labor Statistics shows median household income in this area falls well below the Texas state average. For many families, that gap makes routine maintenance feel like a luxury rather than a responsibility. And when a roof leak goes unrepaired or a plumbing issue lingers too long, deterioration quietly spreads until the house itself becomes unsafe to live in. It's not a dramatic collapse. It's a drawn-out unraveling. Market data from Redfin reveals that homes here often remain listed for extended stretches, sometimes double the national average, largely because the pool of qualified buyers has thinned out. After all, who's eager to take on a renovation project in a town where employment opportunities are steadily shrinking? On the subject of jobs, figures reported by the Texas Workforce Commission frequently show unemployment levels edging above the statewide rate. Fewer steady paychecks mean fewer residents with the credit strength needed to secure home loans. Vacancy rates only add to the concern. Local housing assessments suggest that in certain pockets of the city, close to 10% of homes sit empty. That's not just noticeable, it's transformative. Entire streets begin to feel hollow. Then there are the tax sales. County auction records reflect a steady flow of properties being sold off due to unpaid taxes, often at deeply discounted prices. Many of those purchases go to investors from outside the region who rarely, if ever, set foot in the community. Too often, those properties remain untouched, deteriorating while their owners wait for a surge in growth that may never arrive. Number 8 takes us south to Alice, a town that once proudly called itself the hub of the oil patch. Here's the hard truth about oil economies. They're wildly rewarding when prices soar and absolutely unforgiving when they crash. During the boom years, driveways filled with lifted trucks and freshly built homes seemed to appear overnight. But when the downturn arrived, many of those same houses were abandoned, keys left behind as the wind began to sweep through empty lots. Alice has been living with the aftereffects of that crash for years now. By 2026, drilling operations had shifted to more profitable regions, leaving behind an oversupply of houses and not nearly enough buyers to fill them. What remains is a stark reminder that economies built around natural resources are risky bets, and more often than not, it's everyday homeowners who absorb the loss. Population figures from the United States Census Bureau show a gradual but steady decline in residents over the past decade. And when fewer people are around to occupy homes, vacancies become inevitable. A housing market simply cannot remain stable when rooftops outnumber residents. Foreclosure trends reinforce the picture. Reports from RealtyTrack have documented noticeable spikes in foreclosure activity here, in some cases rivaling numbers seen in much larger metropolitan areas. The difference is scale. When high-paying oilfield jobs disappear in a small town, the economic shock hits harder and faster. Without those steady energy sector paychecks, mortgage payments fall behind. It's straightforward arithmetic, but it carries heavy consequences. Compounding the issue is the condition of the housing itself. Many properties were constructed quickly during earlier oil booms, prioritizing speed over long-term durability. Local building assessments suggest these homes were not designed to withstand decades of shifting soil and harsh weather. South Texas ground movement has led to widespread foundation problems, and repairing that kind of structural damage can cost tens of thousands of dollars. For many households here, where poverty levels remain stubbornly elevated, that kind of expense simply isn't realistic. Market data from Zillow indicates that a large share of homes in Alice are priced below $100,000. At first glance, that might sound like a bargain. But once you factor in renovation and structural repairs, the true cost can easily exceed the purchase price, turning what seems like an opportunity into a financial pitfall. Number 7 brings us to Marshall, back in East Texas, a town that feels like a case study in slow, visible decline. Marshall wasn't always struggling. At one time, it stood as a regional powerhouse for pottery production, rail transport, and commercial trade. Today, though, it can feel less like a thriving community and more like a fading exhibit, where the artifacts of prosperity are quietly deteriorating in place. There's no denying the setting has charm. Towering pine trees frame blocks of historic brick buildings, and for a moment, you can almost imagine the town in its prime. But that charm competes with the growing number of boarded-up homes scattered throughout residential streets. It often feels as though nature itself is inching forward, reclaiming what's been left unattended. Vines climbing fences, brush overtaking yards, porches sagging under years of neglect. The air hangs thick with humidity. The streets are unusually still, and the silence carries a weight once you understand how important this place used to be. The numbers snap you back to reality. Research from Neighborhood Scout shows that vacancy rates in certain zip codes climb beyond 15%. On some stretches, that translates to nearly 2 vacant houses out of every 10. And empty homes rarely stay neutral. Local law enforcement reports suggest that abandoned properties frequently attract squatters and illegal activity, which only accelerates the downward spiral for neighboring homeowners trying to maintain stability. Blight spreads block by block, almost like an infection. Financial strain runs deep here as well. Data from the United States Census Bureau places the median household income significantly below the national benchmark. With limited disposable income, large-scale repairs and renovations often remain out of reach. In some cases, properties deteriorate after owners pass away, leaving heirs unable to cover inheritance-related expenses or costly structural fixes. These so-called heir property complications have become increasingly common across the region, tying up ownership while the houses themselves crumble. Additional insight from the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development highlights another warning sign: minimal new construction. Developers typically follow demand, and the lack of fresh building projects suggests that confidence in the local market is low. The housing landscape feels stagnant, like standing water that hasn't moved in years, quietly breeding more problems. Even within Marshall's historic district, which should serve as a showpiece, there are stretches that appear untouched by investment or oversight. Number 6 takes us to Kingsville. The name might make you think of the legendary King Ranch with its legacy of land and wealth, but for most homeowners inside the city, life feels far less royal. Set across the wide, flat heat of South Texas, Kingsville has a noticeably temporary vibe. The presence of Naval Air Station Kingsville and Texas A&M University Kingsville certainly brings a steady flow of people into town. The problem is, many of them don't stay long. They come for training, school, or short-term assignments, and then they move on, rarely investing the time or money needed to restore aging homes. That churn has created clusters of rental-heavy neighborhoods where properties are often worn down by years of turnover. Some landlords, faced with rising maintenance costs and modest rental income, eventually decide it's simply not worth the effort. When that happens, houses are left to deteriorate until abandonment becomes inevitable. Census housing tenure data from the United States Census Bureau confirms that renters make up a substantial share of the population. Areas dominated by rentals historically experience faster physical decline. When occupants don't own the property, long-term upkeep tends to slide down the priority list. But the deeper challenge is financial hardship. At various points, census estimates have placed Kingsville's poverty rate near 30%, an alarming figure for any community. When nearly 1 out of every 3 residents is struggling financially, home repairs understandably take a back seat to basic necessities. Replacing siding or repairing a roof becomes unrealistic when grocery bills are already a stretch. Foreclosure complications add another layer. Property analytics firms report a noticeable share of so-called zombie foreclosures here, homes where proceedings began but were never fully completed. That leaves properties trapped in legal uncertainty. No new buyer steps in, no renovations begin, and the structure quietly decays in place. The climate doesn't offer much mercy. The intense South Texas sun beats down relentlessly, and occasional tropical systems bring heavy rains and wind damage that neglected homes simply can't withstand. On top of that, data from the Texas Department of Insurance indicates that insurance premiums in vulnerable regions have been climbing. For low-income homeowners, rising coverage costs can be the final push toward walking away. Number 5 brings us to Harlingen, tucked into the center of the Rio Grande Valley. This area is famous for its citrus groves and seasonal winter Texans, but it's also long struggled with persistent poverty. On paper, the cost of living here looks affordable. In practice, though, achieving any real financial stability is becoming harder by the year for many residents. By 2026, Harlingen is dealing with an oversupply of aging, storm-worn houses that cost far more to repair than they're worth. The divide between those getting by and those barely hanging on feels enormous, and abandoned properties are increasingly the visible evidence of that gap. The environment doesn't help. The heat and humidity settle over the city like a heavy blanket, amplifying the sense that economic pressure is everywhere you turn. Flood risk is a major part of the story. Federal floodplain maps from the Federal Emergency Management Agency show that sizable portions of Harlingen fall within high-risk zones. As flood insurance premiums continue to climb, many homeowners face an impossible equation. They can't afford the coverage, yet without it, buyers won't touch the property. For some, walking away becomes the only option, a financial cul-de-sac with no exit. Income data from the United States Census Bureau routinely places this region among the lowest income areas in the country. When median household earnings are that limited, a $20,000 roof replacement might as well be a six-figure renovation. Necessary repairs get postponed until postponement turns into abandonment. Reports from the Texas Department of Housing and Community Affairs highlight another pressing concern: the volume of substandard housing. These aren't simply vacant homes sitting quietly. Many are structurally compromised, plagued by mold, water damage, and serious safety hazards. Local code enforcement departments often find themselves overwhelmed, issuing demolition orders faster than they can realistically address them. There's also the phenomenon of seasonal properties left behind. Decades ago, retirees from northern states purchased modest cottages or mobile homes here to escape winter weather. As that generation ages and passes on, some of those properties remain unclaimed or neglected, slowly deteriorating in place. Market data from Zillow indicates that the lowest tier of Harlingen's housing market has very little movement. If you own a distressed property here, selling it can be nearly impossible. In many cases, the house remains in limbo until natural decay finishes the job. Number 4 takes us even farther south to Brownsville, practically at the edge of the map. Just a short drive from Harlingen, this border city sits at the southernmost tip of Texas. With SpaceX launching rockets nearby from its Starbase facility, you might assume that kind of high-profile investment would spill over into surrounding neighborhoods. But the reality on the ground tells a different story. While spacecraft rise into the sky, many older homes are quietly collapsing back on Earth. Brownsville feels like a place pulled in two directions at once, where ambitious, futuristic industry collides with long-standing economic hardship. The pattern of abandonment here has deep roots, often tied to generational poverty and complicated land ownership disputes that trace back decades, sometimes even a century. Drive through certain barrios and you'll see small, aging homes that have sat vacant for years, right next door to families doing everything they can to keep their properties tidy. The contrast is striking and deeply personal. The economic data underscores the challenge. Figures from the Bureau of Economic Analysis consistently rank Brownsville among the lowest per capita income areas in the nation. Under that level of financial strain, abandoning a home isn't about neglect. It's often about necessity. Families consolidate households, moving in with relatives to cut costs, leaving behind structures they can no longer afford to repair. Population trends add another layer of complexity. According to the United States Census Bureau, while the city's population has grown in recent years, the quality of the housing stock hasn't kept pace. Older properties continue to deteriorate faster than they're being replaced or rehabilitated. Then there are the so-called contract for deed arrangements. Texas legal aid groups have long warned about predatory lending practices in parts of the state, including here. Under these agreements, buyers may make payments for years without gaining full ownership. Miss a single installment after decades of paying, and the property can revert back to the seller. In many cases, those reclaimed homes sit vacant rather than being reinvested in, adding to the inventory of decay. Market data from Redfin shows that distressed properties in Brownsville often linger on the market for extended periods. Potential investors hesitate, wary of title complications and the high cost of rehabilitation. Number 3 brings us west to Big Spring, out in the wide-open stretch of West Texas, where the highways seem to lead mostly to more highway. Big Spring owes its existence to oil and gas, and at the same time, it pays the price for that dependence. This is a tough, wind-whipped town where fine red dust settles onto everything and never really leaves. By 2026, the community is once again absorbing the aftershocks of unpredictable energy markets. When oil prices tumble, workers don't linger. They pack up fast, sometimes overnight, breaking leases and walking away from mortgages as they chase the next boomtown. What gets left behind feels almost surreal. Empty houses stand as if someone stepped out for groceries and never returned. You'll see abandoned toys in dry yards and curtains swaying through cracked windows like the neighborhood was cleared out in a hurry. Public safety concerns add fuel to the problem. Crime statistics compiled by the Federal Bureau of Investigation and analyzed by platforms such as Neighborhood Scout have shown that Big Spring has struggled with elevated violent crime rates compared to many other Texas communities. For families weighing their options, that matters. People hesitate to settle in places where property theft and break-ins feel common. As more residents move away, fewer stable homeowners remain, and vacant homes can attract even more unlawful activity. Property values begin to slide, reinforcing a difficult cycle. Vacancy levels here tend to mirror oil prices. When the cost per barrel dips, housing occupancy often drops with it. Reports from the Texas A&M Real Estate Center frequently note that Big Spring faces an oversupply of aging, lower-quality homes. Many of these properties were built quickly during mid-20th century oil surges. Today, they suffer from poor insulation, deteriorating wood, and outdated plumbing systems. Renovating them to modern standards can cost far more than their resale value would justify. Market estimates from Zillow often price these distressed homes surprisingly low. Even so, buyers remain scarce. Investors are cautious, reluctant to step into a market that can shift as abruptly as the oil industry itself. Drive through certain sections of town and you'll pass block after block where lawns have turned brittle, windows are shattered, and for sale signs have faded under the relentless West Texas sun. Number 2 brings us back to the Gulf Coast, to Beaumont, where the humidity alone feels like walking into a steam room you never meant to enter. This city has endured so many hits from Mother Nature that the fact it's still standing feels almost defiant. Hurricanes, tropical storms, and major flood events have battered the housing stock year after year, leaving visible scars across entire neighborhoods. But it isn't only the weather causing damage. The local economy plays an equally punishing role. Beaumont has long been an industrial hub, yet in 2026 it's grappling with population decline and a growing number of boarded-up homes that reflect deeper economic strain. The air here feels heavy in more ways than one, thick with moisture, tinged with petrochemical industry scents, and layered with a sense that growth has stalled. Demographic trends underline the issue. Data from the United States Census Bureau shows a steady outflow of residents, many relocating west toward larger metro areas like Houston in search of opportunity. What's left behind is an oversupply of homes, particularly those already weakened by repeated flooding. When a property has suffered chronic water intrusion, resale becomes nearly impossible. Mold remediation and structural repairs are expensive, and without stable, well-paying employment, many homeowners simply cannot afford to restore the damage. Insurance costs compound the hardship. State-level insurance data indicates that windstorm and flood coverage premiums along the coast have climbed sharply. For some families, escrow shortages tied to rising insurance bills have pushed them into foreclosure. Crime statistics add another layer of difficulty. Reports compiled by the Federal Bureau of Investigation have frequently placed Beaumont among higher crime cities in Texas. In certain neighborhoods, safety concerns drive potential buyers away, accelerating vacancy rates. You can see the impact block by block, stretches where every third house appears empty, lawns overtaken by tall grass, debris scattered, porches sagging from years of moisture exposure. Foreclosure tracking from RealtyTrack shows that bank repossessions occur regularly here. Yet financial institutions rarely invest in meaningful upkeep once they take control. Vacant properties are often left unattended, dragging down the value of surrounding homes. Number 1 takes us to Port Arthur, a place that, for many, represents the most striking example of large-scale abandonment in the Texas landscape. If you're looking to understand what industrial decline truly looks like, Port Arthur delivers that picture in stark detail. Massive refineries encircle the city, and the presence of heavy industry is impossible to ignore. You don't just see it, you smell it, you feel it in the air. Yet while the industrial machinery keeps running, residents have steadily moved away over the course of decades. This community has endured repeated blows from major Gulf hurricanes, severe flooding, and long-term economic neglect. By 2026, driving through parts of downtown feels less like navigating a living city and more like passing through the memory of one that used to thrive. Population figures from the United States Census Bureau show a dramatic drop from the city's peak years. The infrastructure, roads, utilities, public buildings, was designed to support far more residents than remain today. The result is an oversized framework with far too few people to fill it. Vacancy rates rank among the highest in the state. Entire blocks have been cleared, with some areas bulldozed and left to return to grass and brush because there simply weren't enough residents to justify rebuilding. Environmental concerns compound the challenge. Reports from the Environmental Protection Agency have documented pollution issues in and around the area, which inevitably suppress property values. When air quality alerts become routine, attracting new homeowners becomes an uphill battle. Economic hardship is equally severe. Poverty levels here consistently rank among the highest in Texas, leaving little to no financial capacity for meaningful home renovation. Many of the houses still standing bear visible evidence of repeated flood events, water lines etched into drywall like historical markers of each storm that passed through. Real estate data reflects the decline. Median home values remain strikingly low, and even at those prices, properties can sit unsold for years. You might find a house priced comparably to a used car, yet the investment risk remains substantial due to structural damage and market instability. What makes Port Arthur especially sobering is that the abandonment extends beyond housing. Closed businesses, shuttered schools, and reduced public services create a sense that the community's broader spirit has thinned out along with its population. It stands as a powerful example of what can happen when environmental disasters and economic shifts converge over time. And that concludes this journey through a side of Texas rarely highlighted in glossy travel features. It's easy to glance at broken windows and splintered wood and see only decay. But each vacant property once represented someone's goal, someone's plan for stability and comfort. These towns remind us that economic surges are often temporary, and natural forces are rarely predictable.